A lot has changed, so we're going to dive into our updated top 30. We're going to go top 40 wide receivers. We're going to include the rookie picks, however, and these are going to be super flex rookie picks. So yes, if you're playing in a one quarterback league, move these rookie picks dramatically down the rankings because you're not going to have Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels pushing everybody else down. But starting off tier one, Jefferson, Chase, Lamb. Not too much to discuss outside of Justin Jefferson. Yes, Jefferson is a wide receiver. You should lower down your rankings from a redraft perspective. The short term is going to be pretty ugly. They have Darnold. Maybe they make a play for a quarterback in the NFL draft. I've seen some people saying Caleb Williams. They're not getting the number one for Caleb Williams. I'd be extremely surprised if that ends up happening. Maybe they go Bo Nix. Maybe they go Michael Penix Jr. And maybe they go J.J. McCarthy. If they really were to trade up, possibly they get to Daniels or May, but most likely it's not happening. And most likely Justin Jefferson's going to have bad quarterback play in the short term. But in terms of the long term, he's Justin Jefferson. So from a dynasty perspective, I'd have a very difficult time putting him anywhere but one. I know a lot of other people want to have Lamb over Chase. I mean, head over to flockfantasy.com, the community rankings. I know a lot of y'all are putting Lamb right there. I'm still going to take Jamar Chase. I think especially if you consider the outside chance that T. Higgins may be on the move. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go with the 101 as our next pick. We're going to assume it's Caleb Williams. You just look at the quarterback versus wide receiver value in Superflex. I think you probably have to give the benefit of the doubt to the pick. Then we are going to be going Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, St. Brown's going to be right next to the 102 rookie pick. That 102 is most likely going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. And I think this is exactly where you should expect Marvin to slide in, right? Somewhere in between Amon-Ra St. Brown as well as Puka Nacua. I understand that Puka had an incredible rookie season. And I'll say maybe it's hypocritical because if Marvin has the same year that Puka just did, he may be the wide receiver one in Dynasty, but I'm always going to give the premium to the guy that has the pedigree versus the guy that kind of comes from nowhere. Of course, if Puka comes out, repeats what he did last season, I think he could continue to move up. But we have him in tier two. Yeah, so we have St. Brown, the 102, 103, then Puka Nacua. Then dropping down to our next tier, we are going to be going with Garrett Wilson. With Wilson, I understand hasn't necessarily been great over the past 2 years. And yes, he was overdrafted last season. I was fine drafting him where he was going in redraft leagues. You have Aaron Rodgers go down. Zach Wilson's his starting quarterback. You get some of the worst starting quarterback play in the entire league. And yeah, you're going to be pretty damn bad. But with Garrett Wilson, even with some of the worst quarterback play in the entire league, he's still been usable from a fantasy football perspective. You go ahead, look at him historically compared to other 21-year-old rookie wide receivers. The man had a very impressive season year one and followed it up with the year where he had a ton of volume in year two. So I still think that he's a phenomenal wide receiver. We'll put him right before the 104. The 104 is going to be like Drake May, Malik Neighbors, or Jaden Daniels. You're not going to have one of those guys available, but you'll be picking between the other two. Next, we are going to take A.J. Brown. If you are looking at A.J. Brown here, I have listed him as that sell high guy. If you're able to pivot and you're able to say, get Garrett Wilson, if you're able to maybe pivot over to the 104 and instead come away with Drake May, Jaden Daniels. If you look at what we should expect just through a range of outcomes lens for A.J. Brown this next season, still should be a phenomenal wide receiver from a redraft perspective. It's just you get to this point of your career in Dynasty that it almost doesn't really matter what you do in the short term. You're going to be going down in value regardless. So it is what it is. 105 will be our next slot here. I mean, at the 105, you're going to be looking at the last guy in the tier of Neighbors, May, Daniels. Probably Malik Neighbors, which I would have right here alongside Chris Olave. I mean, Olave, similar story to Garrett Wilson, very much overdrafted last year. But with that being said, he's shown promise as a rookie. He's good as a year two player. The reason I'm going to have him behind Wilson, though, is I'm going to give Wilson a little more of an excuse given the fact that he played with Zach. Then we're going to go Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, 14-15. Tyreek, it's difficult to rank in Dynasty. Obviously, if you're a contending team, you can make a strong argument to have Tyreek at the very top of this tier. But if you're a rebuilding roster, you really don't have any business going after Tyreek Hill. And you would say, well, actually, give me Drake London instead. Yeah, give me the 106. So we're going to kind of go happy medium here. We're going to put Tyreek Hill at 14 right after someone like Neighbors. And then we're going to be going with Jalen Waddle at 15 in that. This is a wide receiver that 2 years ago, league winner. This past year, I understand injuries. I understand it wasn't necessarily exactly what you'd want to see, but I'm still comfortable projecting him out as a high-end wide receiver 2 in the short term. And if anything were to occur to Tyreek Hill in the long term, I think Waddle could see more volume in this offense. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to be going with the 106. The 106 is going to give you your option of one, if somehow any of the top 5 guys fall to you, yes, please give me Malik Neighbors. Or 2, worst case scenario, you get your choice between Rome and Brock Bowers. Rome, phenomenal prospect, will be a top 10 pick, checks every single box, almost every single box, obviously with some exceptions. Brandon Ayuk, Drake London will be our next 2 guys. Obviously, London is the player that everybody wants to talk about, and for good reason. I will reiterate, I thought London was an elite level prospect coming out of USC. I thought that London has shown traits both on film as well as from a metrics perspective that go to show that London is most likely a very talented wide receiver at the NFL level. I mean, you look at his market share numbers and you want to say, okay, well, the only thing that's held him back, the only reason that he has been bad so far is just given how bad his overall offense has been. But with all that being said, even with Kirk Cousins coming over, which is a dramatically better situation, I do think the Atlanta Falcons should be penciled in as a top 10 offense in the NFL in terms of their overall passing volume this next season. We are still projecting out Drake London, a wide receiver going into year 3, to do something he's never done before, and that's be an effective wide receiver in fantasy. I think we have a ton of reasons to believe that he can do just that, but I do want to be a little bit realistic here. I mean, if you go over and look at the Flock Fantasy community rankings, he's currently penciled in as wide receiver 9, only behind Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. Let me see what creators have updated their rankings on the site, and we can see where they have them. I updated my rankings on the site today, in case you want to pull those up. Zach updated his as well from Dynastyland, and he currently has Drake London at wide receiver 12. I believe Corey updated his as well. Yeah, let's go ahead and pull up Corey's from Fantasy Stock Exchange. He currently has Drake London as wide receiver 8. He has him sandwiched between Puka Nacua as well as Chris Olave. So maybe I'm a little bit lower than a lot of other people on Drake London. Instead of having him as like a top 10 wide receiver locked and loaded, instead, we have him as the wide receiver 12. I think that there's a ton of room for excitement. I completely understand why everybody is excited, but we are taking a massive projection on him. It isn't necessarily like it's a Jalen Waddle situation or a Chris Olave situation or an A.J. Brown situation where we've seen these guys be productive at the next level. And of course, if you want to check out all of my rankings on the site, all the rankings of all your favorite creators, all on flockfantasy.com. You can find the link in the description, comment section. Code FLOCK, if you're not already a member, will get you 30% off any sub. Plus, yours truly will break down your Dynasty Fantasy Football team in a podcast. Plus, you can find our Dynasty Trade Calc there. You can find our Dynasty Trade Finder, all the premium content from all your favorite creators, including a ton of rookie draft guides. But yeah, find all that with the comment section. Now, going over to our next few assets, we're going to go within early to mid 2025 first. Obviously, if you knew that, hey, this is the 101, this is the 102 for damn sure, it'd be higher on this list, but I always want to be a little more conservative if you are trading for those 2025 picks. We'll go to Vonta Smith at 20. With Smith, phenomenal prospect, right? I mean, this is a wide receiver that was pretty damn good through the first 2 years of his. The only thing is, one, this offense may be a little bit more run heavy with Barkley. 2, A.J. Brown is still the solidified wide receiver 1. And 3, we don't necessarily know if this offense will be as effective as it's been in years past based off what we saw with Jalen Hurts at the end of last season and possibly the offensive line getting downgraded just slightly with no Jason Kelce. And we're going to go the 107 at the very end of this tier. 107, like we said, it's going to be Rome or Bowers. I mean, maybe McCarthy ends up as like a top 5 NFL draft pick. And if somehow that happens, obviously you have to consider him here. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I mean, we're going to look at 2 very big tiers, and this is why we do this as a tier list, right? You can rank these guys however you want, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to make an argument that DJ Moore should be lower on this tier, you do that. I'm going to have DJ Moore at 22. I think this will be the best quarterback play that DJ Moore has seen in his entire NFL career with Caleb Williams coming over. Obviously, he was phenomenal last year. It wasn't a good passing offense, but he still absolutely dominated just from a market share perspective. So yeah, I mean, Moore still, obviously older. He is an asset that you're not really excited about from a rebuilding roster, but still pretty young and just looks to be super productive this next season. Now, going over to the next guy, we are going to be looking at Michael Pittman Jr. With Pittman, this is a wide receiver that kind of fits in a similar mold. I don't necessarily have any concerns about him in the short term. The only thing is you're not rostering Pittman if you're a rebuilding team, right? I mean, he's kind of a cornerstone asset in that you don't really need to panic sell him if you're rebuilding. He's still going to be around for years to come. If you're contending, I think you can expect him to be a solid wide receiver too. But the potential issue is just Anthony Richardson may not necessarily give this offense a ton of passing volume. Richardson could still be a very good real-life quarterback, and he could monopolize a lot of the points for himself on the ground. Now, going over to our next guy, we are going to be looking at Rashee Rice. Rice could easily be a big-time riser on this list. Rice, pretty much, at least at the time of this recording, has dodged all the bullets he needed to in free agency. If he can get through the NFL draft where the Chiefs do not add in another wide receiver of significance, Rashee Rice will be higher than this. He was used a little bit as a gadgety type player, not necessarily running routes deep downfield. But the reason we drafted him a lot in rookie drafts last year, not necessarily because we think he's a top end talent, but we think he's a young wide receiver attached to Patrick Mahomes, where we really have nobody else that you need to be concerned about in that offense. So if that's the situation you have going into this next season, I think you'd be excited. Nico Collins, Tank Dell will slide in as our next two options here. I mean, both young wide receivers, both guys that have been very effective, or at least were very effective last season. Now, if you are looking at Dell, I understand why you'd want to have him over Nico Collins, given the fact that he was a rookie this past year. However, they were still incredibly close if you are looking at their production. And Tank Dell was like one of the oldest rookies we've ever seen. Tank Dell's a year older than Kyle Pitts. He's about the same age as Nico Collins, even though Collins has been in the league forever. And I do want to reiterate, while Tank Dell just went out there and had the best season we have ever seen from a player at that size, we have still never seen a wide receiver like under 180 pounds, I think is the threshold, to be a top 12 wide receiver from a points per game perspective. And Dell's 165. So I still want to be giving him a slight knock due to his size. Maybe say, well, he did it last year. He also got hurt last year. I don't want to say that's because he's a smaller wide receiver, but I would like to just see a confirmation that we can throw all that historical analysis out the window when it comes to his weight, which we very easily could, depending on things continue to go. Now, Jordan Addison will be our next guy. Jordan Addison, a big-time follower here, and it pains me to say because I thought Addison was a great buy low candidate this offseason. I was drafting him in a lot of underdog best ball drafts. Of course, with the asterisks, assuming Kirk Cousins is a Minnesota Viking this next year. Now you don't have Cousins under center. I still think that Addison is a very talented player, but if the passing volume's not there, I don't know. I'm more confident in Jefferson just continuing to dominate targets, especially if it's a situation where the quarterback there is not great and they're going to essentially have to look at their first read more times than not. You can make a strong argument to have Zay Flowers over Jordan Addison at this point as well. I think possibly you should. It's just tough for me to move Addison down too much. We're going to go 108 here, pick 29. This is like going to be Brian Thomas Jr., right? So how I'm viewing Brian Thomas Jr., or at least this range of player, someone with a ton of upside. I think Brian Thomas Jr. could come out and be a high-end wide receiver 2 in fantasy as a rookie, and then all of a sudden looks like a top 12 wide receiver in Dynasty going into next season. At the same time, I think that Brian Thomas Jr. could come out. He could be a complete bust. Of course, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's in the range of outcomes. And you could see him in a Quentin Johnston light 12 months from now. So I think you have an extremely wide range of outcomes. We've seen Dell. We've seen Addison. We've seen Flowers find success at the NFL level. I don't necessarily think it's possible for them to turn into complete bust at this point. And I still think all of them respectively have high ceilings as well. So I think that's why we are going to be putting him right here after these big three. And we're going to go T. Higgins at 30. Now, at the time of this recording, T. Higgins is a Cincinnati Bengal that either wants a contract from the Bengals or a different team. I'm assuming you'd rather stay in Cincinnati and just end up getting paid, but it's a business. If he's not going to get paid in Cincinnati, you may see him elsewhere. I know it may seem like, oh, okay, if he goes elsewhere, he gets away from Jamar Chase. Maybe that's a good thing. No, it's not. You want him attached to Joe Burrow. You want him in that offense. He's similar to Pittman in that he's a little too old to be a rebuilding piece. So he is more of a contending piece that has an extended runway. If he stays with the Cincinnati Bengals, though, I think we can move him up here. Just please don't send him to Tennessee. Don't send him to Carolina. Now, jumping into our next tier, we're going to go Deebo Samuel, 31. I think you could make an argument Deebo's a lot more appealing than the guys ahead of him if you are a contending team. But while Deebo's in the same class like A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, this is still someone that came out of South Carolina. It's so old that he's old enough where we can say he's pretty much just a contending asset. We're going to go the 109 and then Jackson Smith and Jigba back to back here. I want to reiterate, I love JSN as a prospect. If you look at the historical screener with what you had from JSN as a rookie, more times than not, his rookie season indicates a wide receiver that is going to be a bust at the next level, that is not going to have the upside of a player that we want to be chasing, such as Brian Thomas Jr. Now, with that being said, of course, we loved him as a prospect. And you have to look at the context of the situation and adjust from where the numbers stand from there. He got injured to go into the season. He played alongside DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So with that, I am 100% willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. He was also much better. He flashed. He looked good on film compared to Quentin Johnston. So I do not think that he deserves to be in the same bucket as Quentin Johnston. But you can't really compare him to the other wide receivers year one that found a lot of success and that historically speaking look to be on the right path, where JSN appears on paper to be on the wrong path. Now he can change that, and I'm really hoping he does. I'm really hoping he defies the odds of that historical research. But I can't put him ahead of Addison. I can't put him ahead of Flowers. I can't put him ahead of Dell, even though I had ranked him ahead of all those guys going in to their rookie seasons. We can't ignore what happened as a rookie completely, even if the situation wasn't great for him. Now, Jaden Reed will be our next guy. Reed, pretty damn good. Year one, super crowded wide receiver room. I believe that he is the wide receiver one in that room. However, obviously, I'm ranked over someone like Christian Watson. And yeah, really good offense with Jordan Love going forward. We're going to go the 110, and then we're going to go Stephon Diggs. Looks like Diggs will be a Buffalo Bill. And it's very concerning what we saw with the offensive coordinator change in the second half of the season. Obviously, this was a spot that you would want a solid answer to, and we would want a reason on why that happened in the second half of the year, and hopefully a guarantee that it's not going to happen again. I'm probably never going to get that guarantee. I think he's a contending piece with a lot of upside, but obviously you have to be putting him at a discount. We're going to go mid to late 2025 first afterwards. Then we're going to go George Pickens. Pickens gets the bump with better quarterback play going from Pickett to Russell Wilson. And Pickens gets a bump as well with no Deontay Johnson. Now, I do think the Pittsburgh Steelers, now that they move on from Deontay, could 100% go after a wide receiver in the NFL draft. If they decide not to go after a wide receiver in the NFL draft, we will be moving Pickens up our rankings even more. But keep in mind, this is someone we had as that buy low candidate a few weeks back. Now, DK Metcalf, last wide receiver. I understand people are going to be screaming at us about Metcalf. The past 3 years, he's been a high end wide receiver 3, low end wide receiver 2 from points per game basis. Like the wide receiver 25 over the past 3 years. He's old enough where it's going to be hard to make too many excuses for him as well. So, I don't know. I don't want to come out here and say, oh, he's big, he's strong, he looks like an alpha on the film. The numbers say that he's high in wide receiver 3. And I don't necessarily think he is going to continue to get better going his age like 28 season. Now, I think that's all I have for y'all. Really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe. If you want all my rankings, all the rankings of all your favorite creators, all on flockfantasy.com. Code FLOCK, get 30% off any sub. Plus, yours truly will break down your Dynasty Fantasy Football team in a podcast. Find that link in the description in the comment section. But thank you again. Really appreciate you, and really hope we get to see you out with the video tomorrow.